Well, this is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. To begin our conversation, let's take a compilation from the president's speech put together by Dennis Temple.
As your president, I assure you that we are committed to finding sustainable solutions to alleviate the suffering of our citizens. Once again, I plead for your patience as the reforms we are implementing show positive signs, and we are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Exactly 64 years ago, our founding fathers chose democracy as a form of government and launched the dream of a great country that will lead the rest of Africa out of poverty, ignorance, and underdevelopment. On the security front, I am happy to announce to you, my compatriots, that our administration is winning the war on terror and banditry. Our target is to eliminate all threats of Boko Haram, banditry, kidnapping for ransom, and the scourge of all forms of violent extremism. Within 1 year, our government has eliminated many Boko Haram and bandit commanders faster than ever. The economy is undergoing the necessary reforms and retooling to serve us better and more sustainably. If we do not correct the physical misalignment that led to the current economic downturn, our country will face an uncertain future and the peril of unimaginable consequences. In our foreign exchange market, we inherited a reserve of over 33 billion 16 months ago. Since then, we have paid back the inherited forex backlog of 7 billion. We have cleared the ways and means debt of over 30 trillion naira. We have reduced the debt service ratio from 97% to 68%. Despite all this, we have managed to keep our foreign reserve at 37 billion. Our energy transition program is on course. We are expanding the adoption of the presidential initiative on compressed natural gas for mass transit with private sector players. The federal government is ready to assist the 36 states and FCT in acquiring CNG buses for cheaper public transportation. Our economy can only thrive when there is peace. As we work to overcome the challenges of the day, we remain mindful of next generation as we seek to galvanize their creative energy towards a better future. We lead today with the future we wish to bequeath to our children in focus, recognizing that we cannot design a future that belongs to them without making them its architects.
That's just a part of the speech which the president delivered this morning, and many thanks, Dennis, for putting that together. Now, joining us for the conversation on the presidential broadcast on Nigeria's 64th independence anniversary, it's a pleasure to welcome right here in the studio, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, Dean, Postgraduate School, Bayes University. Many thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. Happy Independence.
Same to you. And of course, we also have with us right here, Honorable Ahmed Sajo, former Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Adamawa State. Many thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much.
Happy Independence.
Well, happy Independence to you too.
And we have also been joined here by a former Director General of the Voice of Nigeria, VON, Osita Okechukwu. Thank you for coming.
Happy independent Nigerians.
Same to you. Well, let's begin this conversation. Maybe I should begin with the academic for, for obvious reason. What's your immediate reaction to the presidential broadcast? How do you assess it?
Okay, the speech is actually traditional. On a milestone day like this, we expect this president to communicate with citizens, which he has done. And of course, such speeches are supposed to be helicopter-like, providing a bedside view of the situation in the country, from politics to economy, and all development strides, that are supposedly in the offing or probably on ground, in the past, present, and making projections into the future. So, and of course, we also have to look at it within the context of what a presidential speech should be. Is it clear? Is he filled with pathos? Is he concise? And of course, does it make enough projection? Largely, we will say it does. Capturing, telling us the achievements in the economy, no doubt. Difficulties in the system, no doubt. And of course, the efforts that they are making to remedy the situation, everything appears clear, even though, in my opinion, the hardship is profound, but the measures are also obvious, but the measures seem slow relative, to the preponderant hardship in the land. That's not to say that the efforts, may not yield result in the future, but in comparison, in terms of relativity, you will say the positive effect of the economy is coming rather slowly relative to the preponderant hardship in the land. But of course, he also signposted developments in the agricultural sector where there are hopes, mentioning some states and what this could result to in the future. Security too, he wasn't shy in that area. He was very expressive of the achievements of the administration in the security sector, even though we need some more efforts, And of course, I could sympathize with the president when he was highlighting a key factor in human life, in human in human characteristics, where the tendency is for you to focus on the negative more than the positive. The negative words often always catch your imagination faster than the positive. So citizens, essentially look at what has not been done rather than what has been done in the last 64 years. In the last 64 years, no doubt, Nigeria has survived. We have remained one. And there are prospects for us. We're not the only heterogeneous society in the world. And no society is essentially completely homogeneous or heterogeneous. But what heterogeneous societies do is to manage their heterogeneity properly. Nigeria has existed as a heterogeneous society in the last 64 years. 64 years is not a joke, which means we have put in substantial efforts in managing it, which also means that if we put in more efforts, we can manage it better and develop as a reputable nation, respectable in the community of nations. The president underscored this, but without missing, by admonishing citizens that, look, yes, we are oftentimes likely to be focusing on the negative, but let's not forget the positive. Having survived a civil war, we've survived many threats, many political upheavals, as the case could be, but even at that, we are still waxing strong, and there's still hope. That was implied in the speech. But finally, from me, I think the presidential speech should connect with the emotions and sentiments of the people. That connection was also there. You could see the pleas that he was making, because the populists can be very, very volatile, and they should and can never be taken for granted. So you could see the pleas, the prayers for patience, for tolerance, But again, what citizens often say is that, yes, if you're asking us to be patient, to be tolerant, to make sacrifices, we want to see it exemplified in our leaders. If it's exemplified in the action and inactions of our leaders, then we can be in tow. We can key into that pathway that you're creating for us. So on all counts, the speech is not a bad one, even though we know that there can hardly be any perfect speech. But if you look at all the key indicators, if we want to check them as much as possible, we will probably check up to 60%, as the case could be.
All right, many thanks, Prof. You have scored the president.
It's for a reason that he had to start.
60% is pass mark, by the way.
That's a B.
Oh well, but I think there should be tests and all that. You don't just score with exams. There should be tests, class attendance, and all of that.
That's what makes it the 60.
But I'm not competent enough to teach the president.
Anyways, thank you very much, Prof, for setting the tone for the conversation. I'd like to get to Honorable Ahmed Sajo now. Listening to Professor Adeni, speak about the speech, he talked about it being traditional. He talked about it being emotional. But I want to find out what you think, as a Nigerian. If listening to the president this morning, watching the president, since he assumed office on May 29 last year, his body language, the actions and inactions of government, and all that the president tried to say this morning in his speech, would you say that this administration understands what Nigerians are currently going through at this time?
I think I start from the way the takeoff, the way the president started. He did not taxi. When the prof was talking about the helicopter view, he actually the speech actually took off like a helicopter. He started straight from saying, "I understand that there is pain in the land. I understand that there are difficulties. I understand that you are having difficulties making a living." It started point blank on an understanding of the situation we are in, and then there are several other confessions. One of them that is very key is to say we undertook certain reforms because we wanted to avoid a system collapse. It's always been said on the ground, harshly, that, look, if the president had not taken certain decisions that he had taken, over the course of the last 16 months, the system itself would have collapsed. The country would have, but the speech was very clear on that. If it was before said, harshly, that, with low tones, the president has come out to say, we did that to save the system from collapsing. He said it in the speech. And I also like the identification of, building a country for the younger generation and asking them to come out with a template for how the future that belongs to them, to a large extent, should be constructed. I wonder if that may eventually, come up with designs and programs that could actually impact more positively on the younger population. That the president confessed more than 60% of the Nigerian population. So I think I saw it as a confessional statement. We agree that we have, taken measures that have inflicted hardship in the land. We understand the nature of the hardship. We realize that those things are necessary for us not to have a system collapse, and the president said, okay, we are focusing on the future. He says there's light at the end of the tunnel, agreeing again that what we are facing today is darkness. It's a difficult time. And, but when it came to some of the things that the president is doing, to alleviate those hardships, the issue of security, yes, we have noticed that of recent, several Boko Haram and bandit commanders have been brought down. One of them that is very key is Sububu, who was not just a major kingpin, but he was a don in his own right, owning mines, fields, and things like that. We appreciate that, and a return to the farm. Although I say it with some little bit of disturbance, the speechwriters had should not have mentioned any state, because many states are working very hard that have not been included. If you notice that the first state to have introduced local rice in bags in supermarkets is Ebonyi State, Ebonyi Rice. And they're still doing quite a lot in terms of agriculture in Ebonyi, but the speechwriters forgot to include that in the states that are doing very well, and they're still doing very well. So I think we shouldn't have mentioned, but by and large, we're making progress. And the president had also confessed and accepted that the federal government does not control land. Land belongs to the subnationals. And so no agricultural program will succeed if you do not, put subnationals as the drivers. And so it's a very good thing that when he appealed to subnationals to join the federal government to up the ante in terms of food production,
mechanized agriculture.
It was a right message to the right constituents. But I also agree with the president that we need to mobilize our people to appreciate the fact that our diversity is a source of strength, not a source of misunderstanding within ourselves. But we also want to see a lot more of that within the leadership cadre. Leaders must begin to treat Nigerians with a level of equity and fairness that will make every Nigerian feel that he is wanted. We've still not managed, at leadership level, we have still not managed our diversity very well. If you go to the office of every minister, I say this every time, when you go to the office of every minister, what the workers you see there working with him are mostly people from his own enclave, making it look like he has come to represent, he's just an ambassador of his own area, and taking other people out of the system within his. But meanwhile, he's on the delegated mandate from a president that has the nation as his constituency. So we must begin to encourage the leadership of the country to integrate themselves more, with other Nigerians, so that we can have a Nigeria that serves the interests of every Nigerian. Building cohesion within a diverse society requires actually positive demonstration on the part of leadership. And I think if the president has made it so clear that we need to build on our diversity and create strength, I think those that are helping the president to run the country, including even our representative at the National Assembly, should begin to be more inclusive in the manner they run their systems, so that we can actually truly believe that our diversity is a source of our strength. But I join the president in appealing to Nigerians to understand with the leadership at this point in time. The president says there is light at the end of the tunnel. I pray that we reach that light at the end of the tunnel, and that every Nigerian, enjoys the fruits of the
All
country.
right.
Thank you very much, and happy independence to everybody for being alive to witness 64 years of Nigerian independence.
Thank you, Ahmed Sajo. Let's now get to Mr. Osito Kechukwu. You're also partly media and politician, so we'll get a blend of what we've seen before. What's your reading of the president's speech, and if you may, perhaps body language that has gone with it?
Let me start by saying once more, happy independence to Nigerians and friends of Nigeria, because there are friends of Nigerians who are more committed to the development of the country than some of us. And let me start by saying that Mr. President represented our cadre, or what we can call in Igbo balance, the 3 age grades of Nigerians who were there before independence. I was 5 years old at independence. And a lot of people have forgotten the numerous achievements that have been done. I know the number of roads, the number of vehicles on the streets where we were growing up, the number of universities, the number of other tertiary institutions like polytechnics. And we cannot dismiss it. In our Christendom, one of my favorite hymns is the one that said, "In spite of the billow of the hardship,
count your blessings. Name them one by one. So Mr. President had addressed us to look into what are the pluses we have gained in 64 years that he accepts. And for the uptime time, he's acknowledging that he knows there are hardship in the country, that the challenges are heavy and enormous to the average families. And in trying to look at the depth of the matter, he now wants to organize a 30-day conference, reaching out the 7th age grade that make us about 70% of Nigerians. That is the youth. So it's now left for us, the parents, to get the youths, instead of agitating on the streets, to articulate their own positions on how best, because whether we like it or not, the future belongs to them. So I'm happy that Mr. President, instead of allowing them to go on the streets, he's saying, ladies and gentlemen, let us talk. Let's have your own input. Because in his speech, he identified one of the things any diplomat I've met will remind me. He said, when do people ignite your Kadnu spirit? Mr. President mentioned it, that Nigerians are doing well abroad in all fields. If we're doing well abroad in all fields, what is the problem here? So this is now the challenge for our youths. If I have opportunity to meet some of them before they go to the conference, I'll ask them, what is your articulation? Don't just go there as a bazaar. Because I've, quite over years here, watched Nan's election from the sideline. And I could see as well as some of them do not actually know what they want. But this is an opportunity for them to articulate their position. To ask Mr. President, you mentioned in your speech about the economic stabilization plan. Let us see the bill. Go through the bill and interrogate Mr. President. At the end of the day, reach a communique. They might even go as far as telling Mr. President that there is a missing link. That in all the plans you have categorized, they are leading to prosperity. But can they get to prosperity if, as Hajo said, and as Prof said, we do not adopt one of the greatest Africans' ageless maxim, that leadership must commit class suicide. You want to do privatization process. If you don't do it transparently, it won't work. That is what my party, the APC, have been battling in the last 9 years. They privatized NEPA. It went into wrong hands. I remember when they were telling President Buhari, so why don't you knock off this disco leadership? He said, I'm not military head of state. There are rules and checks and balances. So these are what the youths and all of us should. Because Mr. President has done so well by trying to let us know that he knows the crisis. And they told us that if you have an idea of your problems and it remains solution, and Mr. President had lined up solutions, but can those solutions be achieved? He told us about $33 billion reserve. He paid only 7. The Mr. President proved what happened to the $33 billion. The 30 trillion of ways and means. Yes, you paid back. Was it interrogated? These are what Nigerians need to know. If there was an Osito Okechukwu that was culpable, please. I know that the EFCC leadership and others are doing well. But we still expect, Mr. President, that I remember what the wife said immediately they came to power at the National Christian Center. The wife said, luckily for us, I can say here, Nigerians, that we can thank God in terms of wealth, my family is okay. We came here to work. And Mr. President repeated it. When Kenny Naman and others met him the other day, he told them, I didn't come here for money. Mr. President should translate it to his leadership. This China will glorify They were like us. But suddenly, one of their tonic was the Amika Cabra's class suicide. If you commit any culpable corruption offense, you are shot. And immediately you know you can be killed. You'll be hesitant to dip your hand because it's very attractive to dip your hand in the treasury. So we need that aspect. Mr. President to know how his leadership can commit class suicide.
Okay, I'm glad it's coming from you because you're a politician yourself. I'm sure you know how that will sound, amongst politicians at the moment. But it's not about how it sounds; it's about making Nigeria great. A lot of people have said Nigeria is supposed to be, the giant of Africa, but at the moment a dwarf. Some people have also said that Nigeria is supposed to be a country that sneezes, and other countries will catch a cold. But that's not the reality in some cases. And the president made a reference to that in the speech. I'll just quote him quickly. He said, and I quote, "We must also recognize some of our missed opportunities and mistakes of the past. If we are to become one of the greatest nations on earth, as God has destined us to be, our mistakes must not be allowed to follow us into the future." And so that would be a line for my next question, Professor Adeniyi. I'd like you to, highlight some of the mistakes you think we have made in our journey, 64 years down the line, and what we can do to get it right.
Okay, just to emphasize more on your background, reference to Nigeria as a giant. We have had it even in many circles. Some people have described Nigeria as a giant with a feet of clay. Some people have said Nigeria is a sleeping giant, a big for nothing country. We have had all that, and it's coming against the background of huge expectations of not just from ourselves but from fellow African countries that look up to us on account of our size, expecting us to provide leadership. And when we're not providing that leadership, they just use terms, to describe us either directly or indirectly, and we'll see this in interactions. Very unfortunate. But again, it's not to say that all hope is lost. As long as we're still alive, there's still hope. I think somebody also mentioned it earlier. Our mistakes, mistakes are also natural. They are integral to human existence, even at the individual level. How much more at the societal level. But the idea is not to say that we will not make mistakes. But what do we do to remedy those mistakes? Have we been conscientious enough in trying to move away from those mistakes, or to learn from our mistakes to bring about improvement? And and speaking directly to your question, we'll say yes. There are instances where we should have risen above some things, and we have failed to rise above those things. One is our failure to deal with the question of corruption, the absence of transparency, the absence of accountability, the fact that maybe less than 1% of Nigerians actually believe in this country. Less than 1% of Nigerians actually believe that Nigeria is a country that can stand for them, that they should contribute to. So you see a majority of Nigerians are just angling to see how much they can take away from Nigeria, not how much they can give to Nigeria. So our Nigerianness is still very poor, A spirit of nationalism is abysmally low. There's preponderant absence of patriotism. How do we galvanize this? Because it's an intangible that is good enough, that is strong enough to bring about the growth of any nation. So when that spirit of nationalism, of patriotism, committed to the greater goal is absent, and you are seeing it reflected in, deep-seated preponderant corruption, it's actually worrisome. And this is a part that we need to move away from. And you see it everywhere, very systemic, very endemic. I remember Professor Ademola Adebo arguing that there's no point, apprehending people individually and dealing with them. It will not solve the problem. We've been doing it from the 60s, but yet we've not been able to get anywhere. So what are we going to do in this direction? It's a fundamental mistake that we cannot run away from. But again, what about our value system? If you talk about an American, and what value do they subscribe to? They will tell you about freedom, happiness, prosperity. If you talk to a British citizen, of course, they will tell you about tradition, hard work, welfareism. Talk to a Chinese, they will tell you about discipline, hard work. To a Japanese, they tell you about discipline and hard work, culture and tradition. To a French person, they will tell you about style, tradition, elegance, and these are the things that we regard these nations for. All these things are positive. What value can we say we subscribe to as Nigerians? Our value, like the president also acknowledged somewhat in his speech, is around resilience. Will you say resilience is positive? Resilience is simply saying that there are hardships around, we'll be facing difficulties, but we've got the steel heart to withstand it. Somehow it could be positive, but that's not where we should be compared to other values, attributed to other nations. Okay, President also added the word. Apart from resilience, he said tenacious. We agree. We are strong people. Sometimes people have even described us as the happiest people in the world. But what kind of happiness is this? You are happy in the midst of difficulties. And was it a fella that said suffering and smiling? So we want to be able to change that narrative, to be one that is positive, one who will prioritize prosperity, one where we privilege patriotism, where there will be love for the nation. And how can there be love for the nation when the nation is much more responsive to the yearnings and aspirations of the people, when the nation is keeping to the letters of the Constitution, around provision of welfare, guaranteeing welfare and security of citizens, when the nation is much more responsive to the idea of social constructs. Citizens surrender their rights to the state, for the state to otherwise, to in turn protect them, as the case could be. But can we presently see that our state, the Nigerian state, is presently protective of the citizens, and as the citizens also very responsive enough to the state? Are they not pilfering and plundering and badgering the state, because they do not believe in it? So those are the fundamental mistakes, that we should try to redress as we step ahead. Remember what I said earlier, that there's no big deal about Nigeria being a populous country, being a heterogeneous country, because we are not alone. America is an immigrant society, and they've been like this over the years, which means it's a conflation of nationalities. Not just even local nationalities, but we're talking about transnational, multi-ethnic nationalities, but they've been able to walk around it through the instrumentality of the law and institutions. We can do the same thing.
All right, Professor Abiodun, thank you very much for your thoughts there. We'll pause here for a break so that when we return, we're talking more about the economy with Ahmed Sajo. Please stay with us.
The federal...
All right, thanks for staying with us. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA, where we have been discussing the presidential broadcast of this 64th independence anniversary. Now, let me get to Ahmed Sajo. Much of the issues that Nigeria has at the moment seem to be economic. Some of it tied to security. For instance, the inability of farmers to feel safe in their farms, which the president has said that they are working to address. Because when the farmers go back to farm, well, food production will increase and then prices can drop. But there are others. Talking about inheriting $33 billion in reserve, and clearing backlog of forex, clearing ways and means of 30 trillion, reducing debt service ratio from 97% to 68%, and all of that. But it does seem that in spite of all of this, the economy is not picking up at the pace that Nigerians would want it. I mean, Prof alluded to it earlier. So what more needs to be done? Of course, there are other things being done here and there, but what do you think can be done to revamp the economy and put smiles on the faces of ordinary Nigerians?
First of all, let us be honest with some of these discussions. The fact that $7 billion had been offset, 30 trillion ways and means, the debt to service ratio from 97 to 68, reserve from 33 to 37, in spite of all that had happened, is positive on the macroeconomic outlook. At the level of the national economy, in terms of its management by the leadership of the country, that is what stabilized the country. That's what the president was talking about. That would have, if this intervention had not resulted in these results that you are reading now, the system would have collapsed. Imagine debt service ratio 97%. That means that you only have 3% to work with. No economy, no system would have survived that. So we in terms of the level of the management of the economy, that had stabilized the economy and protected it from collapse. But at the micro level, at the level of the citizen, the Hausa people have a saying that when you tell a dog that there's a ceremony in the house, it says, let me see it on the ground. So let people eat and then throw away the bones for him to see that, yes, there was actually a ceremony in the house. You know, that kind of a thing. So people are saying, look, let it translate into drop in food prices, let it translate into drop in transport prices and the rest. That's when it will affect the people. That's when the people will believe. There are also some exaggerations that we must begin to debunk. I traveled recently, just about 2 weeks ago, from Abuja to Yola by road. And I was in a bus with some people who believe that the entire north has been bedeviled by insecurity and that there are no farms and that cattle headers are entering in the farms and destroying. And I told the guys that we were going with, look, from Abuja here by road up to Yola, we've seen the farms. Okay, nobody had abandoned his farm. We've not seen one cow inside the farm. You know, so to some extent, sometimes we exaggerate some of those our challenges and create some fear. You know, scaremongering has become part of our lifestyle in this country today, amplified by social media. But in general, we have a relatively more peaceful atmosphere to go out there and farm. One of the challenges we had, which the president had spoken about, actually this year, what destroyed our crops is not more of security as is done by flooding. Flooding had really been very, very destructive this year. And, you know, we have to understand that there are a lot of things that we do in this country that we're not actually, you know, making use of our knowledge base. Flooding happens every year. For example, every year, if they don't release the spillways in Lagdo Dam, the dam will collapse. Releasing the spillway means that water will flow down the river Benue and go and connect to the river Niger in Lokoja, and they'll be flooding on the banks all along. We know this. What we needed to have done long ago, which we have not done, is to create a buffer dam somewhere around Asin Hausa. That dam would have helped us to capture the water and regulate it downstream. But we have not been able to do that. So now that we have this as an annual event, we must find other ways. Maybe the silting of the river beds, you know, to allow them carry more volume of water instead of allowing the water to go. We must find a solution to that. Now, another thing that we need to talk about, we're talking about independence. Whatever the president says we're doing to our economy, an economy that is bleeding, no matter how much blood transfusion you make to somebody who is bleeding, you will not stabilize that person. Our economy is bleeding. What is bleeding our economy is the fact that we have a system where criminals and criminality are not considered serious activities that should be dealt with. People still, you hear of people stealing millions or billions, and you nothing. They walk the streets. They even mock you if you meet them. What are we doing about that? And what are we doing when the Prof spoke about patriotism and the rest? You know, we make mistake. A country is a country, yes. A country is a geographical expression. We all know we are in a country called Nigeria. We have 36 states. We have 774 local governments. We know all their boundaries. We are a country. But are we really a nation? Let's be honest. A nation is a collection of people with shared values. What are our shared values? You know, what are our shared values? What are the things that we do? When we talk about China, you talk about China. China went through some humiliating experiences when they were colonized or defeated in war by Japan, and they suffered and they went through, and then the West entered, and before the Mao Revolution. When Mao came, what did he say? The first ethos that China adopted was that never again shall we be humiliated by anybody. Never again. And that is why their national anthem starts like our former national anthem. Arise. Arise, O you who refuse to be slaves. So they have agreed that this is their direction. We are not going to be humiliated by anybody again. We are not going to be subservient to anybody again. What are our national ethos? What have we agreed as a people that never again shall so and so happen to us? So we must begin to construct our country around values that we believe that could serve the interests of our people. If we have common values, and whoever steps out of line with of those values, we call him back into line. Somebody, a criminal steals from our national till, he must be punished immediately, not this long 15, 20, 30 years. You are trying somebody for having stolen funds, and in the course of stealing those funds, if it has to do with the hospital, it has destroyed the health system. People have died because of that. If it is a road, he has eaten the money, potholes have grown, people have had accidents there, they have died, and yet the person you are pampering him for about 30 years, asking questions that are irrelevant. We have, since 1999, we have a bill in that National Assembly that has refused to be passed. They call it the Proceed of Crimes Bill, that will have changed the way we look at corruption. Instead of the state proving that you stole money, you are to prove how you came about your wealth. Because yesterday you are walking in the street with somebody who doesn't even have anything, and tomorrow he has 10, 20 cars, and he has mansions, he has an estate somewhere, and then you now tell me that you are asking, was he corrupt? I mean, do you need anything to tell you? So we need to begin to ask ourselves.
Questions.
When I was growing up, let me tell you, when I was growing up, sweet, if they give you outside, you are rushing home, you want to know how, have to explain to your mother
how you got
it. When you come back with money to your village, everybody looks at you and they begin to ask, how did he make the money? Today, if you come back poor, I was in public service just because I tried to be straight. I was even almost disowned, even by my own family. That people think that if you don't have it, you are not it.
You wasted opportunity.
It's dangerous. We're changing our value system. We're changing our system. So we need to rebuild our value systems around honesty, around integrity, around fairness, equity, justice, inclusion, so that we can build the giant that we're talking about.
Ahmed Sajo, you have said so much, and of course, amongst the things that you said, so many things to think about. And then you did mention the words of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, that Nigeria is a mere geographical expression. And a lot of people, want to pin to that particular term, not just from Chief Awolowo. Let's just quickly look back. The aftermath of the amalgamation of the Northern and Southern Protectorates, Ahmadu Bello described Nigeria as the mistake of 1914. If you look away from that, Yakubu Gowon, following the 1996 crisis, which culminated in Nigeria's civil war, was emphatic that the basis of unity was no longer there. And then he went on to talk about, of course, let's look at 1948. Abubakar Tafawa Balewa said, since 1914, I quote, the British government has been trying to make Nigeria into one country, but the Nigerian people themselves are historically different in their backgrounds, in their religious beliefs and customs, and do not show themselves any sign of willingness to unite. Nigerian unity is a British intention for the country. Now, my question is to you, listening to Ahmed Sajo speak passionately about what we need to do in our country, and looking at these comments from our forefathers and where we are as a nation, 64 years, do you think that, like Ahmed Sadio asked, are we really going to get to that point where we can say we are a nation, not just a country?
We're a nation. We're not a mere geographical expression. I've gone through the history of the world. There's no country that at one point or the other that was not a small segment until it was joined with other groups. The issue I'm telling you, I came from a town that is 98% Catholics. Speak Wawa dialect of the Igbo language. But that community is divided over chieftaincy struggle. That is very fierce. Over 20 years, luckily, they say time heals. So if a community, for instance, is a federal republic, it's also divided. And by oral history, they told us that this village, by the same mother, this man was senior to this man, this one senior to this one senior to the fifth. Same mother, same father, same Catholic Church, 99%. Same Wawa dialect of the Igbo language. And a lot of communities are divided that way. What is holding us is what I told you. Amika Cabral is a Guinea-Bissau. They killed him at the age of 49 because he keep on telling people that, look, Guinea-Bissau, you're going to get independence soon. Are we sure that those who will take over from the colonialists will not start repeating eating out of the people? You could go the economic program of neoliberal. It's not a problem. But if you want to go, please, it must be transparent. We're a nation. What is killing us today, we thought some of us followed Buhari for 13 good years. We thought he's going to replicate what he did before in the army. He told us one age, one rule of law. And I'm thinking that Asiwaju should also turn the page. If we do not start being more transparent, whether we are split into regions, states, town hall, community, what is the battle about the local government autonomy Mr. President mentioned? The battle about that is that the governors have become emperors. Luckily, I asked them in an Ohedeze meeting, I said, had a Yoruba man or Hausa man been Enugu state governor since 1999? They said no. I said, have you people sat down one day and asked the Imo state governor? Yes, the federal government has a huge fund, but in revenue allocation, the federal government has about 52%. The state 26%, the local council 20 points. Why are the governors insisting on controlling that 20 points at the detriment of the local communes? Is it about region? We are one. I disagree with him. What Awolowo quoted was what one distinguished diplomat, Austrian diplomat, Matnik, quoted as an Italian diplomat back in 1913. He told him, look at Italy, we are talking. You are a divided country, you are a geographical expression. The man told him, we don't know who will break. The Austria the man was representing split into Germany, this and that and that. Italy remained one. So let nobody tell us we are a major geographical, so we are not one. In small churches, the crisis between reverend fathers, pastors, and imams and their congregates is about transparency. What is holding us? Take for instance, you want to, in 1986, the debate was, we can't go structural adjustment by the academics. The then president, General Ibrahim Babangida, in his own, as a patriot, he said, let us liberate the Nigerian people to do it the way they want and leave government handy with policies and small. But was it done with transparency? We privatize this, we privatize that. Was it done with transparency? No. That's why it failed. When Mr. President, in his own patriotism, said subsidy is gone, why is the hardship? The hardship is because we didn't probe the subsidy regime. We didn't probe it to know where the funds are going. If we had probed the subsidy, we would have any hitch.
In other words, you agree with Ahmed Sajo that corruption and lack of transparency is
Yes,
a major part
not
of the problem we
about
have,
geographical, not about mere geographical expression.
at
We are
least in
one.
this regard.
I didn't say mere geographical expression.
No, I mean my sister, sorry.
Sorry, can I make it quick? Can I make it?
I'm saying, no matter
Just-
whichever
yes.
economic policy you adopt,
We are running out of time.
whether you run neoliberal, you go welfare, if the system is corrupt, you are going nowhere.
All right, Professor Aduni, you want to respond?
Yeah, I
to-
just want to make a small contribution to the.
In a minute,
interesting
please, because we are
conversation.
almost out of time.
Yeah, there's a difference usually between a country, a nation, and a nation state. What I think we are is actually a nation state. But in all of this situation, what matters is how you build that entity. And that's why we call it nation building. Just like the way you build a house, you construct a nation, by being mindful of all the key elements they've mentioned: transparency, accountability, bondedness, unity, quality leadership that is painstaking, that is not episodic or knee-jerk in policy decisions. They set directions, policy directions, and they follow it painstakingly. Over time, then it grows, leading to unity, bondedness. If you if you deviate, then there is going to be a problem.
When you
Look
say
at
nation state, what do you mean?
a nation state, which means a nation under construction. It's not yet a nation yet. The nation is more advanced than a nation state. A nation state is a state or a country, a location that is still trying to be a nation. We can get to that level of a nation if we are steady at the construction. Through
Talking about the
instrumentality of
construction,
quality
talking
leadership.
about the construction now.
And
Of
I
course,
think
the electoral process.
The president mentioned it.
Yes.
The president mentioned it in his speech.
Yes.
Listen to him. He said Nigeria is a work in progress.
Yes, that's right.
Our progress is a work in progress. A nation state is, the state apparatus are there. Once you have the state apparatus, you are a nation state. The state apparatus, the presidency, the National Assembly, and all of them, police, we have the state apparatus.
Let's talk about this work in progress now,
Yes.
this nation state. In the work in progress, of course, the electoral process is a key aspect of how it develops into a nation.
Yes.
And looking at our electoral process, the way we elect leaders, the way leaders come
That's right,
about
yes.
in this country, we rather want to look at ethnicity, religion, and other
Yes,
factors,
yes.
and not looking at competence, looking at qualifications and all of that. Would you say that is a construction that is leading to, if you like, I don't know. Do you think that construction would be firm,
No,
or it's going to crumble?
It's inadequate. It's inappropriate. But at the same time, we can't lose hope on that because it's just an aspect that is inadequate, right? But other things are still falling in place. Other things can still fall in place in the future. It's a stage of development, even though it's a poor stage that we can remedy. But we cannot remedy it from the sky. It has to be from the ground through the instrument of good leaders, who are committed, to changing the narrative. Many of these developed nations that we talk about today were once like us. But the argument we are making is that we have them to learn from, quicker than we are presently doing. He mentioned China or Singapore that we are at par with those days, but now they have gone further ahead from us. So what's wrong with us? Why are we not catching up? Why are we not moving as quickly as we can, considering the enormous resources at our disposal? That's the argument. And of course, if we focus on it with quality leadership, minding all the steps, all the building blocks relevant for the construction of a nation state, of course, we'll become a nation that we all can be proud of, bonded by so many things that we share in common. And these are the characteristics that define what a nation.
But how would that quality leadership come about now that there's focus on ethnicity, religion?
I think you're making we're all making mistakes in this country. We are equating democracy with elections, and that's where we got it wrong. Democracy is a whole it's a whole system. Election is just a part of. But because we have reduced our entire democratic practice to just elections, and you find that even our political parties become only active during elections. After elections, they just recede to the background and they're no longer active. We need to reconstruct our democracy. Our democracy should be a democracy that is so robust that we can discuss all these issues we are talking about.
Time is one more thing.
Yes.
We're running
just
out
a
of
minute,
time
Prof.
because I just wanted, while you are here and talking about democracy and all of it, how much importance should we attach to building institutions that are stronger than individuals?
Of course, naturally, that's the whole aim of democratic practice. You have institutions that can check the powers of individuals. All this when you're talking about governors becoming emperors and the rest, it's because the democratic system had not established, strong institutions that can question anybody. You notice that the State House of Assembly, instead of checking the governors, they become like puppets in the pockets of governors. And to a large extent, the oversight function of all our legislative houses are very weak. Some of them, have weakened themselves by the nature of our greed as a people. I cannot be a representative in the National Assembly or State Assembly, and I still have interest in getting contract from the ministries that I oversight. It blunts my capacity to oversight those ministries and those agencies. So we need to build strong institutions that can stand on their own and say, look, no, this is our role and function, we must do it. The same thing with our security institutions, the same thing with our regulatory institutions. It's the weakness of these institutions that makes the individuals become so strong that they at every level, every leader operates like a mini emperor, a mini god within his own system, and he's not questioned,
on the office you occupy,
depending on the size of the office and the rest and the resources at
all right, we need to go because of time, but I'd just like Osita Okechukwu, your last words in 20 seconds to Nigeria.
Our leadership must muster the political will to commit class suicide, place public interest, common interest above self.
All right, Professor Adeniyi, your last thoughts?
Yes.
10 seconds.
You said earlier that how can we get good leadership? It can come in two ways, through happenstance and through a painstaking effort if we reform our electoral process. That is very, very important, because electoral process is a key element for the deepening and the expansion of our democracy. Going forward, we need to be mindful of this.
Ahmed Sajo, what's called you, Prof?
I think my last word is that we've listened to the President speak. He has made an appeal to all of us. He has appealed to the subnational entities. He has appealed to local governments. He has appealed to the people of the country. Let us hearken to those appeals and see what we can do. And let's also advise the President and the leadership to lead by example.
All right.
We need to bridge the trust deficit between the leaders and the followers.
Thank you so much, Honorable Ahmed Sajo, former Commissioner for Information Strategy, Adamawa State. Thank you for joining us for the conversation. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, Dean, Postgraduate School, Bayes University. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Osita Ikechukwu, former Director General, Voice of Nigeria. Thank you so much for being our guest this Independence Day. All right, so that's Good Morning Nigeria, but of course the broadcast continues.
Yeah, I understand that Fisayo Bofuyi and Claire Adelabo Abdurazak are standing by, waiting in the wings in Jagal, headquarters studio.